Corneliu Zelea Codreanu, born September 13, 1899, and died November 30th, 1938. He was 39. Codreanu was captain and leader of the Romanian fascist group called the Iron Guard. The Iron Guard was a group of fascistic Romanians, mostly youth, 20s and 30s. They were heavily nationalistic and religious, fervent believers in Christianity, Roman Orthodox Christianity to be precise. The Iron Guard anointed the Archangel Michael as their figurehead. Like the Archangel slayed demons, the Iron Guard sought to slay the demons destroying their nation. So they became the Legion of the Archangel Michael, on a mission for a better man and nation. The Iron Guard was formed in 1927 and officially disbanded in 1941. The symbol of the Iron Guard is 9 crosses connected to form prison bars. The prison bars represented their willingness to pay the price of hardship, imprisonment, and even death if necessary for their cause. The early formation of the Iron Guard was made up of mostly college students. Codreanu himself was a law student. Throughout Codreanu's leadership, the Iron Guard grew, marching, recruiting, repeatedly being attacked, both physically and by the media, and by also the monarchy that ran the country at the time. They persisted, and at the height of Codreanu's leadership, they reached 15% of the parliamentary vote, making them the 3rd most supported political group in Romania. Not long after that, Codreanu was imprisoned, and later murdered by the state while in prison. After Codreanu's death, the Iron Guard, under the leadership of Horia Sima, formed an alliance with General Antonescu, bringing the Iron Guard to a prominent role, but that ended quickly as Sima and Antonescu would devolve into civil war with each other, Antonescu coming out on top, thus ending the era of the Iron Guard. This video will focus on a few important aspects of Codreanu's belief and his character, mainly drawing from the great autobiography For My Legionaries. We will look into Codreanu's view on the Jewish question, his view on politics, discuss some impactful moments in his life which highlight who he was as a man, and lastly, we'll speak on his imprisonment and death. We start on the Jewish question. The definition of anti-Semitism, according to Jews and those Judaicized, is then summed up in these 2 words: savagery and madness, naturally of the anti-Semites. It was this savagery and madness that compelled all peoples of all time, Egyptians, Persians, Romans, Arabs, as well as the modern nations up to this day, to consider Jews as a national menace and take measures against them. It was this savagery and madness which darkened the understanding of the most prominent representatives of culture of all nations, such as Cicero, Seneca, Tacitus, Mohammed, Martin Luther, Bruno, Frederick the Great, Voltaire, Napoleon, Goethe, Kant, Fichte, Schopenhauer, Wagner, Bismarck, and so on and so on. Countless others in the fields, all who have come out against the Jew. Now, what Codreanu is talking about here is obviously he's mocking the explanation by Jews and Jew sympathizers or Judeophiles of why anti-Semitism exists. Of course, from the Judophile or Jewish narrative, it is simply anger, jealousy, etc., etc. There's never any blame placed on Jewish behavior. So Codreanu is pointing this out here. We go on. Our theaters that were built by the Romanian sweat and money will serve Jewry for the preparation and strengthening of their forces in the fight against us. And on the other hand, from these Romanian stages, they will serve us Romanians as spiritual nourishment, everything that will contribute to our natural demoralization and moral decadence and destruction. Now, this was the time before television, and the theater was very important. The theater was their main venue for entertainment, especially in a country like Romania, when film was just getting started and television had not existed yet. This was the first Hollywood, the stages of the theater, and as can be seen, there was already a monopolization going on in the entertainment industry, even before the entertainment industry became, what is Hollywood today. And we could see it was the same kind of, as he said, quote unquote, spiritual nourishment that they give us with debauchery and hedonism, attacking traditions, attacking cultures, mocking all the beliefs of the nations that they're in, whether it's Romania or America. It's the same narrative. They mock and attack and demean and destroy the culture and the tradition of these societies. And this was Codreanu's and the Iron Guards, and all the Romanians that took part in Iron Guard, their biggest beef with the Jewish collective in Romania is that they were openly attacking their traditions, their religion, their culture. And we see the same thing in America today. We saw the same thing in Germany, and so on and so forth. It's the same story repeated over and over again throughout history. But let's continue on. The Jewish problem in Romania, as elsewhere, consists of the infringement by Jews of this natural law of territory. They trespassed on our territory. Thus, the Jewish problem is not born of racial hatred. It is born of an infraction committed by Jews against the laws and natural order in which all peoples of the world live. Once again, indicting them for attacking traditions and the natural ways of people. Two ways Jewish behavior towards us are specified in the Talmud. If you are stronger than the Christians, exterminate them. If you are weaker than the Christians, flatter them. Money, press, and votes determine life and death in a democracy. The Jews control all of them, and through these, the Romanian political parties turned into simple tools in the hands of Judaic power. Now, this is, of course, why democracy, liberal capitalist democracy, is so beneficial to Jewish interests, because, as Codreanu pointed out, money, press, and votes. That's what democracy is about. That's how you win. That's how you get elected. In 1848, Moldovan merchants and industrialists began to complain to the ruler, Struza, demanding measures be taken against Jewish merchants and the dishonest competition practiced by them. Now, this can be seen. This is just another example of what I displayed over and over again from the great book by Werner Sombart, Jews and Modern Capitalism. In the video, we went over the numerous times that the merchants and the ancient Gentile cultures were frustrated by the practices of the Jew, the dishonest practices, business practices of Jews. And we see the same thing going on in Romania. Same exact thing, same exact complaints. So he goes on. We realized then even better, as a result of more profound reflection, that 1. The Jewish problem is no utopia, but a grave life and death problem for the Romanian nation. The country's leaders, grouped by political parties, become more and more like toys in the hands of their Judaic manipulators. 2. This present political system, through its concept of life, its immorality, and its democratic setup from which it springs, constitutes a real curse fallen upon the Romanian people. 3. The Romanian people will not be able to solve the Jewish problem unless it first solves the problem of its political parties. The first aim to be reached by the Romanian people on its way to topple the Judaic powers that oppress and strangles it will have to be the toppling of this political system. A country has only the Jews and leaders it deserves. Just as mosquitoes settle and thrive only in swamps, likewise the former, Jews, can only thrive in the swamps of our Romanian sins. In other words, in order to win over them, we will have to first extirpate our own defects. Now that's I think these are very powerful little quotes right here. Some of my favorite, especially with the just as mosquitoes can settle and thrive only in swamps, likewise the Jews can only thrive in the swamps of our sins. That is very, very, very true, and that is the reality of the situation. And he touches on the most important part. In order to battle them, you must first battle yourself, and that is the most important battle, is the control over yourself. To pretend that you're going to battle outside forces that are decaying your country without first addressing that decay within yourself is pure fantasy. And all the people, all the revolutionaries, everyone that tried to buck against the powers that be knew this and stated this, and especially all fascistic groups always focused on not only the betterment of their nation, but firstly and most importantly, the betterment of ourselves. This is largely ignored today, as the It's the Jews crowd would rather live who they are, raised and suckled at the tit of Judaic values. They'd rather keep that and think they're above that simply because they point the finger at Jewish media monopolies, or they become conspiracy theorists that see Jews underneath their bed all the time, and they still remain the same shitty character person. I've run into tons of them. They're all over the place. He goes on now. Nothing frightens Jews more than a perfect unity in others. The unity of feeling in a movement, in a people. That is why they will always be for democracy. For democracy will break up the unity and the spirit of a people. Once again, united we are stronger. A united society with culture and traditions defined and preserved. These are not advantageous for Jews in general, especially the wandering Jew who is in America, who is in Europe. It does not benefit them if they have to live in a society. And if we're talking about our classical societies, we're talking about classical societies built around masculine virtues. These are not the strong points for the Jews. So, of course, they're always going to be against it. They're always going to try to destroy it. And they're going to get you for yourself to destroy it. They don't even need to destroy it through war. They can get you to destroy it by offering you, a gluttony of food, a gluttony of pornography or sexual desires, of selfishness, of these things that keep us divided and keep us at our weakest selves. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of the things that are promoted by these societies. So he goes into a little bit of how they take over, or the methods they use to win over politicians or take over local authorities. So, in general, the following methods are used. First, for winning over local politicians. First, gifts. Second, personal favors. 3, financing of the political machine for propaganda, leaflet printing, traveling expenses, etc. If there are several bankers in a town or rich Jews, each is assigned to a specific political party. Now, for winning over local authorities. 1, corruption, bribery. A policeman from the smallest town in Moldova, in addition to the pay he receives from the state, gets monthly salary or 2. Once he accepts a bribe, he becomes the Jew's slave, and if he does not follow orders, then they use on him the second weapon, blackmail. If he does not comply, his bribe taking is revealed. The third weapon is destruction. If they realize you cannot be swayed or subjected, They will try to destroy you, searching out well your weaknesses. If you drink, they will seek an opportunity to compromise you through alcohol. If you are a skirt chaser, they will send you a woman who will compromise you or destroy your family. If you are violent by nature, they will send your way another violent man who will want to kill you or whom you will end up killing and then go to prison. 4. If you lack all of these defects, they will employ the lie, whispered or printed calumny, and denounce you to your superiors. In order to infiltrate into various circles or around some highly placed people, they use 1. Servility, 2. Board of directors, 3. Base personal favors, and 4. Flattery. Plans to ruin the Romanian merchant. Flanking the Romanian either with 1 or 2 Jewish merchants. Selling merchandise below cost, the loss being made up by special funds given by the Kahal. This is how Romanian merchants were ruined. The commercial superiority of the Jew resulting from commercial practice much older than the Romanian. So these are just some of the ways Jews have, that he's explaining that how they had infiltrated the higher up societies, the aristocracy of the Romanians, and also how they crushed the merchants. And you see the same thing go on throughout the American history too, of underselling and knocking competition out and then buying them and making monopolies out of them. It's the same old game. It's the same old game. And especially, once again, it was shown in Werner Sumbart's history of Jews and capitalism, or Jews and modern capitalism, that how they work that angle. They're able to survive because they pulled their resources together, and quite frankly, they lived a very basic, not luxurious lives. So they're able to conserve money, but they're able to undersell their competition, their Gentile competition, get them out, buy them out, and then start creating their monopolies. And lastly, while on the Jewish question, Codreanu says, I do not use the word Jew to insult anyone. I call them Jews, for I believe it is the name they give themselves. It is a curious thing, it seems to me, that they are the only people who avoid their own name. Now, how true is that? The worst thing you can call a Jew is a Jew in today's world. And thus, it was the same thing 100 years ago in Romania as well. That's just how it goes. It's the same old thing. They do not like to be identified. You're better off believing they're white Christian heterosexual males that have monopolies in media and finance. Yeah, that's who runs everything. Don't call them for what they are. You can call them bastards. You can call them cheats and thieves, but as soon as you call them a Jew, all hysteria breaks loose. Now let's go into some of his politics. Fascism means, first of all, defending your nation against the dangers that threaten it. It means the destruction of these dangers and the opening of a free way to life and glory for your nation. In Romania, fascism could only mean the elimination of the dangers threatening the Romanian people, namely the removal of the Jewish threat and the opening of a free way to the life and glory to which Romanians are entitled to aspire. Now, we could see a constant theme in the Iron Guard beliefs was there was this Jewish oligarchy or overlords that were in their country, controlling their country, affecting their country, manipulating their country, and moving it towards a different direction that did not free Romanians, but in fact kind of enslaved Romanians into a way of life that was unnatural to Romanians. So this was a major part of the Iron Guard's beliefs, was involved with the Jewish question. A movement never dies under the blows of the enemy without, but because of the enemies within. Like any human organism, normally only about 1 human in a million dies of external causes, run over by a train or a car or shot to death, drowning, etc. Man succumbs to the internal toxins. He dies poisoned. This could be said for numerous organizations, startup organizations that fell It's, you know, a lot of these people will blame the government. Oh, you know, there's no point in starting a party. The government will infiltrate you, and, you know, they'll take you down, and they'll try to, you know, get you to incriminate yourself. And they'll use this excuse as not creating something that's positive, thriving, and manifesting into reality. But the truth of the matter is, most of these startup organizations die out because they have a majority of people of low quality character. And it's as simple as that. And people can deny that, but that is the reality of the situation. People, if you have a large group of high quality character people, you're going to get high character results. You're going to get good results. And it's just, that doesn't exist. That does not exist. So until people are able to become unified, until people are able to battle themselves and ask more of themselves, demand more of themselves, be more disciplined, you're going to have the same old results. And you know, this is something Codreanu was very well aware of. In this century, in which matter is all powerful, in which no one starts anything however small without first asking himself, how much money do I have? Through our daring gesture, we turned our backs on a mentality that dominated everything. We killed in ourselves a world in order to raise another, high as the sky. The absolute rule of matter was overthrown so it could be replaced by the rule of the spirit, of moral values. We were not denying and will never deny the existence, function, and necessity of matter in the world, but did deny and forever will deny the right of its absolute dominance. And there it is, your materialism in moderation. You know, they weren't living in a fantasy world and completely lost in ideology where they're thinking they can wipe out materialism. No, there's benefits to materialism. It's just in moderation. Today, like it was 100 years ago apparently, materialism dominated the psyche, and I think more so today than it ever has. But the rejection of it is not the extinction of it, is not a desire for the extinction of it. It's to moderate it, to put that animal back into the cage, to control it again and not let it run wild as it has been unleashed upon us too. On top of that, once again, our materialism is used against us. These are all low-hanging fruit. You can easily feed into a man's sexual desires, his physical hunger for things, his desire for pleasure. These are all low-hanging fruit to the advertisers and the media, and this is why they constantly hammer away at it. It's low-hanging fruit. It's easy for all of us, to fall prey to that. This country is dying of lack of men, not lack of programs. At least this is our opinion. That, in other words, it is not programs that we must have, but men, new men. For such as people are today, formed by politicians and infected with the Judaic influence, they will compromise the most brilliant political programs. And boom! That's what I've been saying. And you know what? That's what I've been saying for years and years and years. And maybe I first picked it up from Codreanu, but I believe that it even hammered home that point, or believed in that point before I've read For My Legionaries. But that's it, man. That is it. That's what it comes down to. It doesn't matter about your damn party or the program you make, or it all first matters who you are as a man, what your character is. And this is not, I'm not just stating it as my opinion. This is the opinion of every worthwhile revolutionary around, of every worthwhile fascistic party around, was the same mantra over and over again. A new man must be created. We must shed the skin. We must shed our skin and become something new and different. And that is the most important battle. That is the most important battle. Once again, since it is the hardest battle, since it's no fun to tell yourself no all the time, especially when we live in the era of instant gratification, telling yourself no is hard to do. Defeating personal interest is another fundamental virtue of the legionary. There is no victory without unity, and there is no unity without discipline. Neither statute nor program nor doctrine makes a movement. These could constitute its legislation, define its aims, system of organization, means of action, etc. But the movement itself, creating only a statute, a program, etc., then believing you created a movement, is as if wanting to make a man, you would only make his clothing. Creating a movement means, first of all, giving birth to a state of spirit, a gushing enthusiasm of the spirit, of the heart of a people which has nothing in common with the speculations of cold reasoning. The new state, however, cannot be based only on theoretical conceptions of constitutional law. A new state presupposes, in the first place and indispensably, a new type of man. A new state containing men with old sins is inconceivable. The state is simply a garment to clothe the body of the nation. We can make a new, luxurious, expensive garment, but it will be useless if it covers a body which is worn out, destroyed by moral and physical gangrene. That was from the Nest Leader Manual. As you can see, the quote from Legion, from my Legionaries, and the Nest Leader Manual are pretty similar. I guess he liked that the metaphor of the clothing and the policies being the clothing, and without the man in it, without the spirit in it, any policy is useless. And he hammers this home. Character was a very, very important part of Codreanu's belief, and he, in the great autobiography For My Legionaries, you could see his character displayed through his thought and action. So he hammers home that point. That was very important to him, and rightfully so. It's a very important thing. And all fascistic movements also hammered that point home because it's detrimental. It's detrimental. A leader who accepts outside financing of his movement is like a man who accustoms his body to live on medication. To the extent an organism administered medication, to the same extent is condemned to being unable to react on its own. Moreover, when it is deprived of the medication, it dies. It is at the mercy of the pharmacist. Likewise, a political movement is at the mercy of those who finance it. They could cease their financing at any given moment, and the movement, unaccustomed to living on its own, dies. So yeah, he's talking about taking outside funding and relying on it for his organization. Now, there's differing philosophies on that. For example, like Hitler and the Nazi Party, they took outside funding. They took funding wherever they can get it from. And I don't know, we see the results differed, right? I mean, from the Iron Guard, they never got to the stage of prominence to where they dictated the will of their country, but the National Socialists did. So, could that have been because of they had help with financing or not? I don't know. I know there's just two different philosophies on that. Now we'll go into some of his observations regarding democracy. First, democracy breaks the unity. Democracy breaks the unity of the Romanian people, dividing it into parties, stirring it up, and so disunited, exposing it to the face of the united bloc of the Judaic power in a difficult moment in history. This argument alone is so grave for our existence that it would constitute sufficient reason for us to change this democracy for anything that could guarantee our unity, namely our life, for our disunity means death. Now this is what democracy gives us. I mean, look at today. It's perfect. It's perfect. There's so many different fractions of groups that believe this, and even on the right and left. There's so many fractions of right, so many fractions of left. We just remain a divided people at each other's throat. We're either fighting about class, we're fighting about race, we're fighting about money, we're fighting about jobs, or we're fighting about everything. The planet, pets, etc., etc. Anything we can pick a fight on. Fucking bathrooms. We're even fighting over bathrooms now. So anything that can divide us is being used to divide us, and we're gonna die. If we can't get unified, we're gonna die. That's as simple as that. 2. Democracy transforms the millions of Jews into Romanian citizens by making them the equal of Romanians and giving them equal rights in the state. Equality On what basis? We have lived here for thousands of years with the plow and with the weapon, with our labor and with our blood. Why should we be equal to those who have been here hardly 100, 10, or 5 years? They have neither the equality in the labor, the sacrifice, and the fighting that created the state, nor equality of the responsibility for its future. Equality, according to an ancient maxim, equality means treating unequal things unequally. On what basis do the Jews demand equal treatment, political rights equal to those of the Romanians? 3. Democracy is incapable of community in effort. Divided into parties that govern 1, 2, or 3 years, it's incapable of conceiving and accomplishing large-range plan. One party nullifies the plans and the efforts of another. What was conceived and built by one today is demolished next by another. It is as if on a farm the owners would change yearly, each coming with different plans, doing away with what the predecessors did, their work only to be done away with by the next owner coming tomorrow. And that's, once again, we see it play out in modern day politics. A Republican will get in office, for a few years, and then, you might have a Republican senator in the House, and you'll get some more Republican measures put forth, and then next thing you know, you're going to have a Democrat in office, and they're going to try to take back some of those Republican things done and start adding some Democrat things on there. And then next thing you know, you got a Republican in office, and then they start taking back some of what the Democrats did and start putting a little bit of what the Republicans believe, and it's rinse and repeat over and over and over again. It's what is the definition of insanity? Repeating the same action over and over and over again, expecting a different result. We are an insane nation because we do that every 4 years. And this is a failure of democracy. It cannot unify the people. 5. Democracy is incapable of authority. It lacks the power of sanction. A party, for fear of losing its supporters, does not apply sanctions against those who live through scandalous business deals, running into the millions through thievery or embezzlement. Nor does it apply any sanctions against political adversaries, lest they expose its own shady deals and incorrectitudes. So, yeah, once again, we see everything he's talking about, all his criticisms of democracy 100 years ago, we see it magnified today. And it's the same thing, it's with the bankers and the bailouts. Like, none of these people are getting penalized because these politicians need the money. They need the money. So you think they're going to shoot themselves in the foot? You think they're going to bite the hand that feeds them? No, they're not. They're not. And if every now and then someone has to fall on their sword, someone will fall on the sword. And then the lemmings will all go, hey, look, the law and democracy works. We got it. Or at least the media will promote it to you. Look, this banker went to jail. This banker was fined this much money. The system doesn't change. The game doesn't change. Everything stays the same. And once again, the same things he spoke about 100 years ago in the little country of Romania are magnified today in the world power of America. Lastly, the 6th point, his 6th observation on democracy. Democracy is in the service of great finance. Because of the expensive system and the competition among various groups, democracy needs a lot of money. As a natural consequence, it becomes the slave of the great Jewish international finance, which subjugates it by subvention. In this fashion, the fate of a people is given into the hands of a caste of bankers. And his last little gem of wisdom here. Can the people choose its elite? Why then do soldiers not choose the best general? And you can apply that with sports teams and everything else. Anytime you want to win, whether it's in sports or war, you have this power structure. This power structure set up usually through meritocracy. Usually the coach of the team is skilled, educated, knows the game. This is why he has the coaching position. This is not why they give it to one of the players to be the coach. They give it to someone who has the experience and knowledge to do this. Same with generals, same with war, same thing. Anytime you want to win, you have this power structure, and you don't have it by, created by elections, mass elections. No, because it would become a freak show if soldiers got to vote on, who they wanted their general to be, and players got to vote on who their coaches wanted to be. It'd become a mess. And people know this. This is why you don't elect your leaders in military. This is why you don't elect your leaders in sports. If we would only address our country, which is vastly more important than our military or our sports teams, our country, if we would use the same logic to creating a country that wins, as opposed to just a military or sports team that wins. It's like we know the recipe for those, but for some reason, we don't transfer it over to our country's sake. Instead, we say, hey, let the media mold the minds and then let them think they're free to make free thoughts, when really we've, depending on what news channel they watch daily, we will mold them. So those are his various views on politics, mainly looking at his criticisms of democracy. Now we'll get into a couple life moments of Codreanu that explain and kind of highlight who he was as a person and his character. So we'll go into two moments in particular in his life, and this is from my legionaries. One night my mother woke me up and, crying and crossing herself, said, "Wake up, all the bells of the churches are ringing." It was August 15th, 1916. The feast of St. Mary. I understood that the mobilization had been decreed, and that at that moment the Romanian army had crossed the mountains. Seized by emotion, my whole body trembled. 3 days later, I left home to trail my father, pushed by my yearning that I too be among the fighters on the front. Finally, following many adventures, I reached the regiment in which my father was commanding a company, the 25th Infantry Regiment, as it was advancing into Transylvania on the Ortiz Valley. My misfortune was great, for being only 17 years old, the regimental commander turned me down as a volunteer. Yet I took part both in the advance into and the retreat from Transylvania. And on September 20th, when my father fell wounded above Sovata on the Ceres de Moon mountain, I was useful to him ahead of the enemy's advance. Though wounded, he refused to be evacuated, leading his company throughout the retreat and later into the heavy fighting that followed. At 2 o'clock one night, the regiment received orders to advance. The officers inspected their troops, massed in a tomb-like quiet on the hallway. My father was asked to report to the colonel. Returning after a short while, he told me, "Would it not be better for you to go back home? We will soon be engaged in battle, and it is not good that both of us could die here. For mother then is going to be left with 6 small children with no support." The colonel called me and told me he does not want to take the responsibility of your remaining here on the front. I could tell his heart was in doubt. He hesitated at leaving me alone in the middle of the night, out in the open on unfamiliar roads, 25 miles from the nearest railroad. Noting his insistence, I turned in my carbine and the 2 cartridges. While the columns of the regiment moved on, disappearing into the quiet and darkness of night, I remained alone on the edge of a ditch, then started in the direction of the old frontier and home. When, a year later, on September 1st, I entered the military school of infantry, the thought was still in my mind to be able to reach the front. So here you have 17-year-old Codreanu, and he's desperate to fight for his country already. He has that patriotism flowing through him. He wants to be there with his father. He wants to fight the enemy for his country. Then he's disheartened when he has to be sent back, but it doesn't stop him. He persists. A year later, he gets into military school. He's at the age, and his only thought is getting back to the front. And the war would end before he would be done with his schooling and all of that. But still, it just shows you the character of this young Codreanu. And that same fight, that same fire, that same drive he had as a 17-year-old, he had it as a 30-year-old too, etc. All the way up to the end of his life. He had that drive, and it made him special because, once again, this video can't do great justice to Codreanu's life and the book. But there was lots of trials and tribulations throughout his life that are detailed in the book. And he persisted, he moved forward. They continued, despite having falling outs within his own circles, despite heavy attacks from the media and the police and the system against them. They marched, they tried to gain support and grow and show people that they were the Romanian youth there to reclaim their country, from this internationalist policy. So that same drive, man, he had it his whole life. And that's why I chose to use this example of one of his life moments. This shows you, from a child to an adult, he had that drive. Okay, so for his next moment now, his next life moment that defines him, there was this police prefect, in charge of the police. Mancinu was his name. And, excuse me, I will butcher a lot of these Romanian names and the names of their places. We'll get into something. It's called The Fatal Day. The chapter starts off. So you had this Mancino character, head of the police, was a real piece of shit, real bad guy. So you had Codreanu and people younger than him. Mind you, he's a college student, a law college student, and who was probably a little older. He had a lot of people younger than him still in school. Codreanu had finished school, I believe, at the time of this incident. But then you had high schoolers too. You had a lot of young people in the Iron Guard. So Mancini, what he would do is he would beat them, imprison them, torture them, starve them, try to get confessions out of them. And mind you, these are kids. These are Romanian kids, and he was a Romanian. He was paid off, obviously. And, he was doing as he was commanded by above, but he was sadistic to where he enjoyed torturing these kids, these Romanian kids. I mean, he bodily harmed and, possibly even killed teenagers and young adults, Romanian adults, simply for being political. I mean, it's not like these people were out there committing crimes. Their crime was speaking out against the system, and that was their crime. So this guy was a real piece of trash, and he had beaten Codreanu on numerous occasions, and numerous of his comrades too, imprisoned them all without any justification or reasoning. So this Mancini character, real piece of shit. So now we go to That Fatal Day. This being the situation on October 23rd, 1924. I presented myself at the courthouse of District 11 of Iași as a lawyer, together with my colleague, to represent the student Comarzan, who was tortured by Mancini. The prefect showed up with the whole staff, and there, in full court session before the lawyers and the presiding judge, he threw himself at us. Under these circumstances, risking everything, about to be crushed by the 20 armed policemen, I pulled out my handgun and I fired. I aimed at whoever came closest. The first to fall was Mancini. The second, Inspector Klaus. The third, a man much less guilty, Commissar Husanu. The rest vanished. In no time at all, in front of the courthouse, several thousand Jews had gathered, their hands high in the air, their fingers like talons crooked in hatred, waiting for my departure in order to rip me apart. Holding the gun in my right hand, in which I still had 5 rounds, I grabbed a lawyer in Iași by the arm, asking him to accompany me through the tribunal. We stepped out and walked thus through the howling mob of Jews, which had the common sense upon seeing the handgun to step aside. I was caught by the gendarmes, we'll just call them police for sake of confusion here, of avoiding confusion. I was caught by the police on the way and taken into the police prefecture. Here the commissioners jumped on me to disarm the gun. I gathered all my strength, resisting them for about 5 minutes. In the end, I was overpowered. They then chained my wrist behind my back and placed me between 4 soldiers with bayonets at the ready. After a while, they took me out of that office and far back into the courtyard, placing me in front of a tall fence. The police retreated, leaving me there alone. I suspected they wanted to shoot me. I stood there several hours till late in the evening, waiting to be shot. However, this waiting did not faze me. The news of this tragic vengeance spread with truly lightning speed. When it reached the student dormitories, it had caused a real outburst. From all mess halls and dormitories, students started running down the street towards Union Square. There they demonstrated at length, singing. Then they tried to head to the police prefecture. But the army, by now on scene, succeeded in stopping them. Though chained, I was glad to hear their singing, for that meant that they had been freed of their tyrant. And their tyrant was a Mancini who had died after being shot by Codreanu. Late in the day, I was taken upstairs into the same office of torture, where the investigating judge now sat behind the desk. The same man who I complained 4 months earlier, demanding justice. So he's taking the same room where Mancini used to beat him and other students. And now this investigating judge here, Codreanu tried to complain to him before, but it fell on deaf ears. He interrogated me summarily, after which he issued the warrant for my arrest. I was then thrown into a paddy wagon and transported to Galta prison up the hill near Yash. I was put into a room with 10 other prisoners, where my chains were taken off. My cellmates gave me a cup of tea, then I laid down to sleep. The next day, I was placed in solitary in a room with a cement floor, 1 bed of boards, no blanket or pillow. The door was then padlocked. The room had 2 windows, whose panes were whitewashed on the outside. I could see nothing. 1 wall was so damp that water ran down it. The first day in that room, a guard brought me a loaf of black bread. He opened the door a crack, thrust his hand in with the loaf, for he was not permitted to enter. I was not at all hungry. At night, I stretched out on the boards and covered myself with the coat. I had nothing to put under my head. I shivered. They took me out in the morning for 2 minutes, and then I was locked up again. Another student who was under arrest was able to get near my window during the day, wiped the pane clean, about the size of a fingertip, so I could see outside. Then he walked away, and when about 60 feet away, carefully signaled to me with his fingers. I understood he was using the Morse code. And the student had told him a bunch of other people had gotten locked up, including his father. They were locking down on all the Iron Guard people and people related to them. The second night was much worse. I was very cold and I could not doze off at all. Almost the whole night I paced in the cell. In the morning again, I was taken out for 2 minutes, then locked back in. At noon, I was handcuffed, put into the paddy wagon, and taken to the tribunal for the confirmation of my arrest warrant. Following this formality, I was brought back to Galta into the same dark room. Outside, the weather was getting worse. With no heat, I was beginning to shiver. I tried to get some sleep on the boards, but I was only able to doze off for about a half hour at a time, for my bones ached. Which is understandable. I mean, try laying on a piece of board placed on concrete for your bed. Because of the cold coming up from the cement floor, my kidneys began to ache. Realizing I was losing my strength, I appealed to my will and to gymnastics. Throughout the night, every hour on the hour, I got up to exercise for 10 minutes, obstinately endeavoring to keep my strength. The following day, I felt ill. My strength was visibly waning, despite my determination and willpower. The night that followed, the cold was even greater, and my will no longer functioned. I felt broken. I saw black before my eyes, and I collapsed. As long as my will lasted, I had not worried, but now I realized I was in bad shape. I was shaking all over and could not stop. How difficult were those seemingly endless nights. The prosecutor came in the next day to see me. I tried to hide the shape I was in. "How are things here?" he asked. "Very good, sir." "Have you got nothing to report?" "No, nothing." It was 13 days that I had spent like this. Then they made a little fire for me. They gave me bed linen, blanket, and some matting that was hung on the walls. I was permitted to be outdoors for an hour each day now. So now we're going to skip forward to the trial. So he was held in the jails, as you can see, in horrible conditions at first, and they got a little better later on. Then the argument became, where should they send him for trial? Because it was too hot to be held in a town where he had killed, the head police chief, the head police prefect there. So first they wanted to send him to this very liberal town, that was like one of the only towns that resisted any kind of nationalist beliefs. Other towns had branches in there. This is one of the only towns that didn't. So they fought that off for a while, and they got it sent to another city. So it got sent to another town, and the trial begins. The date of the trial was set for May 20th. The tribunal's president received 19,300 signatures of lawyers wishing to defend me from all over the country. 2 days before the trial, trainloads of students began to arrive. The theater was full to capacity, and around it, outside, over 10,000 people were waiting. The jurors were picked. They took the oath and gravely sat in their places. The indictment was read. Their interrogation followed. I told things as they had happened. The other 5 replied to their questioning likewise. He's talking about his 5 comrades that were with him. Telling the truth, namely that they were not involved at all in the case being judged. The prosecution witnesses were one Jew and the policemen from Yash. During the proceedings, they denied everything. Nothing was true. All the beatings, all the torturing, pure inventions, they claimed. They even denied the medical certificates issued by Professor Bogdan, the pathologist. Their attitude, considering they took the oath upon the cross to tell the truth and only the truth, provoked the indignation of the entire courtroom. One of the witnesses, Commissaire Spanshu, who I now saw metamorphosized into the most tender-hearted being, saw nothing, did nothing. Standing up with the presiding judge's permission, I asked him loudly, full of indignation, "Are you not the one who struck me in the face with your fist?" "I am not." "Are you not the one who dipped the students' heads into pails of water while they hung down, had the soles of their feet whipped?" "I was not there at the time. I was downtown." On his face, in all his gestures, by his whole behavior, one could see he was lying. Though he had sweared on the cross, he lied. The entire crowd in the theater was seething with indignation. Suddenly, as if the collective fury in the crowd willed up, a man from the audience jumped up, lifted the commissioner up in his arms, and bodily carried him out. We heard him shout as he pushed the commissioner down the back steps, "Get out of here, scoundrel, for we do not guarantee your life." Returning, he told the other commissioners from Yash, "With your own hands you have savagely tortured these children. Had you done something like that here in Tournou-Servine," that was the town the trial had been moved to, "people would have slaughtered you. Your presence in this town stains it. Leave on the first train, otherwise misfortune will befall you." Now imagine that. He's got a police officer from another town. People from the court just drag him out of there because he's obviously lying, and it's proven that this guy is lying. And they just flat out dragged him out of the court, kicked him on the ass, sent him on his way out of there. Like, get the hell out of our city. We don't want scum like that or like you around here. Now, too bad communities like that have died, right? Too bad. As a matter of fact, this gesture was welcome, for people were upset. It relaxed the whole tense atmosphere. The torturers were humiliated, and now, as they walked, they greeted people by bowing to the ground, begging for the minutest sign of attention from the most humble carrier of the tricolor band. As if we're not good Romanians. What were we to do? We received orders. No, scoundrels. You had not the heart of a parent, nor the heart of a Romanian. You had no honor, no respect for the law. You say you had orders? No, you had traitors' hearts. This is how people told them off on the streets. Then for about 2 days followed depositions of defense witnesses, people from the School of Infantry, my former superiors and teachers, then victims and the parents testified, reenacting before the judges, and almost in tears, the painful scenes of humiliation to which they had been subjected. It was I who took the floor last. I said, "Gentlemen of the jury, everything we have fought for was out of faith and love for our country and the Romanian people. We assumed the obligations to fight to the end. This is my last word." This was in the 6th day of my trial, May 26, 1925. All 6 of us were taken into a room, there to await the verdict. We were not overtly excited, but somewhat just the same. Several minutes later, we heard thunderous applause, shouting, and hurrahs coming from a large hall. We had no time to reflect upon this, for the doors opened and the crowd took us into the meeting hall. When we appeared, carried on their shoulders, everybody stood in acclaim and fluttered their handkerchiefs. Presiding Judge Varlam, too, was seized by the wave of enthusiasm. He could not resist. The jurors were all at their places, this time wearing tricolor lapel ribbons with swastikas. As soon as the verdict of acquittal was read to us, I was carried out on the shoulders outside, where they had over 10,000 people assembled. They all fell into a column, carrying us on their shoulders along the streets, while people on sidewalks showered us with flowers. We then reached Mr. Leonid's home. I addressed the people from his balcony in a few words, expressing my gratitude to the Romanians for the great love, Romanians of Tumul-Severin, the town they're in, for the great love they showed me during the trial. Now, wow. He goes and shoots the police chief in broad daylight in a courthouse, nevertheless, and he's acquitted. Not only is he acquitted, he's a hero. Not only is he a hero, they actually put on the Romanian colors with the swastika on it. The jurors did as they came out. Could you imagine this today? This man was able to invoke that in his people because they saw the pureness of his intent, and they saw, the despicable acts by their own police committed against their own youth, and especially against a youth that is politically and spiritually motivated for a better country and self. I mean, it makes no sense, and it's pleasing to hear. The first time I was reading this book, I thought that was the end of him. I was reading it, and I had not looked into his life story or anything, so everything was new to me as I was reading the book. And after I was reading about him shooting the police chief, I was like, oh, it's over now, and this must be the end of his story. But no, it wasn't. He survived for many years after that. It wasn't until 1938 that they got him back in prison. In 1938, Codreanu was tried in a kangaroo court that did not let him speak or acquire the proper representation. Now, that's important. They did not let him speak. Why? Because they didn't want him to do the same thing he did last time and motivate the people around him. It was truly a kangaroo court. They railroaded him. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison for sedition, amongst other charges like organizing the youth and things like that. As Codreanu has said, and I paraphrase here, when they cannot get you to break the law, they will break the law to get you. And that's what they did here. That's what they did to Codreanu. They couldn't get him to break the law, so they broke the law to get him in prison. While in prison, Codreanu suffered many a hardship in deplorable conditions, as shown in the book The Prison Notes, which is a small collection of his notes. The prison notes are a few months of Codreanu's diary while in prison. Some excerpts from there. April 19th, 1938. One could say that these strange walls within which one recognizes nothing of oneself and in which one sees nothing of one's family, these hostile walls are only waiting for human life so as to destroy it by sending thousands of arrows like real shafts of death into the body of the miserable, condemned man. April 27th, 1938. I spend my time curled up on the edge of the bed, writing these few lines from time to time on wrapping paper. There is neither a table nor chair. A pencil stub, left forgotten in a pocket, is coming to its end. I can barely hold it between my fingers. The rest of the time, I lay down under the blanket. The misery and pain Codreanu endures is amplified in an expression with his shortest entry into his diary on the 29th of April. He asks, "O Lord, how long is this day?" That was the only entry for the day. The torment he must have been feeling that day. It's sad to consider. Despite days like that, Codreanu's soul was never broken. From May 1929, he says, "May God accept my suffering for the well-being and prosperity of our nation. Pain upon pain, suffering upon suffering, agony upon agony, wound upon wound in our bodies and in our souls, fall after fall, In this way we shall conquer. Even with Codreanu behind bars, the threat for a fascist takeover was imminent in Romania. With that in mind, the powers that be seemed fit to murder Codreanu and a few of his imprisoned comrades. So they staged a scenario for a prison escape and then murdered Codreanu. The facade of the escape story was blown apart by testimony of one of the guards present in the killings. His testimony in 1940 states, and this is how the book For My Legionaries ends, the testimony of guard Sarbru before the investigation commission of the Romanian court in Budapest in November 1940 follows. We left Budapest that night, November 30th, 1929, 1930, in 2 police vans from the police prefecture. We arrived at Sarat. We pulled in at the police station, and they gave the prisoners over to that police station there. Not receiving a precise order, the police did not take the legionaries into custody. All of us were ordered to get back into the vans. We started back towards Budapest. On the way, however, we were overtaken by the major, who barked out, "Back to Sarat." We turned around but stopped in a village several kilometers away where we were quartered overnight. Here we were given wine to drink, expensive cigarettes, and fancy food. Early the next day, we arrived at the prison. All of us went into one of the cells where the legionaries were being held. The 2 majors, whose names I'm not even going to try to say here, instructed us to bow. We were then to execute the legionaries. Placing the driver of our van in the kneeling position, they threw a rope around his neck from behind, showing us how easily one can thus be executed. Everything was over in a few minutes. Then the guards stepped out, one by one, into the prison yard, and each received a legionary in custody. I got one who was stronger and taller than the others. I learned later that this was Captain Corneliu Zelea Codreanu. So basically what's going on here is they take him from one prison to another, and then the squad leaves, but then they're told they have to go back to the prison where they dropped them off. And so they stayed the night in some village. They have, good food, good drink, cigarettes. They go to the prison and they practice on each other. The majors show them how to strangle the people. Then each guard is assigned a legionary. They take them out of their cells. We then took them to the vans. There the legionaries' hands were tied to the bench behind them and their legs to the lower part of the bench in front of them in such a way that they could not move in either direction. 10 of them were thus bound in the first van, 4 in the second. So tied, hands to the van, feet to the van. There's just no way you can move. 14 altogether. I was in the first van with the 10. Behind the captain, each guard was seated behind the legionary in his charge. In our bands we held the ropes. Then we left. There was a major in each van. A tomb-like silence was kept, for we were not permitted to speak, either among ourselves or the legionaries to one another. When we reached the Tancanevsky woods, Major D, we'll just call him Major D, who was to give the code signal for the moment of execution, turned his flashlight on and off 3 times. This was the moment for the execution, but I don't know why none of us moved. Then Major D stopped the van, got out, and went back to the one behind. There, Major M was more authoritative. The legionaries had already been strangled. The captain turned his head slightly towards me and whispered, "Comrade, permit me to talk to my comrades." But at that very moment, even before he had finished his plea, Major D stepped onto the van and stepped inside, revolver in hand, and yelled out, "Execute!" Upon this, the guards threw their ropes within drawn curtains in the van, continued on their way to Jalivia. When we got there, it was 7 o'clock in the morning. There we expected Colonel Zinsu, the prison's commandant. The grave was already dug. Pulled out of the vans, the corpse of the legionaries were then laid on the ground, face down, shot in the back to simulate being shot while trying to escape. Then we were gathered into a room where the colonel gave us a talk saying, "You did your duty. You are not ordinary assassins." Several days later, I was summoned into a colonel's office, who, seeing me, said, "You are a mighty strong. You could have killed 3 of them at the same time." He then branded me a piece of paper to be signed by me, stating that I had received a sum of 20,000 lei as medical help. I told him, "I am not ill, Colonel." He answered, "Listen here, Sabru. Don't you see how bad you look? and keep your mouth shut, for if you don't, I will fill it up with dirt," pointing to the pistol on his desk. Then, as were the other guards, was sent on a furlough. And that was the end of Codreanu's life. He wasn't even permitted to give his last words and last prayer to his comrades, and that has always stuck out to me the most and rubbed me the wrong way. These cowards and pieces of shit murdered this man. They couldn't even give him his final words. Truly disgusting. So, you know, they basically transported him from one prison to another. Then they took him out of the prison they transported him to. All this to simulate how he had an opportunity to escape, him and his 13 other comrades that were murdered with him. And then strangle them, throw them in a ditch, shoot them in the back, cover them up with dirt. Case done. It's over. They tried to escape, and if it wasn't for this man testifying, that's probably the story that would have stuck with it. But thankfully, we were able to find out the truth of the matter. But some retribution was given back to some of the people guilty. Călinescu was a minister of the interior at the time of Codreanu's death, thus having connection with his death. It was learned by the government that the Iron Guard had a hit out on him, so they started rounding up people from the Iron Guard and just killing them with no trial. But they eventually were able to get to Călinescu. As the report goes, they fired over 20 bullets into his body, also killing his driver and wounding his bodyguard. The assailants were caught shortly before midnight on the day of the attacks. On King Carol's orders, they were taken to the spot where they had killed the premier. Huge floodlights from the army trucks illuminated the area. That assembled the crowd could watch as the 9 men were shot in the head with their own guns. The bodies were left under the lights for days. Above them was a large banner reading, "From now on, this shall be the fate of those who betrayed the country." You know, the nerve of those people to talk about betraying the country as they kill a patriot and hero like Codreanu and his comrades. Soldiers and police were given a free hand to deal with any suspected members of the Iron Guard, and thousands of young men were shot and hanged from telegraph poles or tortured to death. And yeah, that's how it goes. So they paid their price as well. They were able to get to one of the people who was responsible for Codreanu's death. But the death and torture of Iron Guard went on until the end of its reign in 1941, or an end of its official reign. But this is the life of Codreanu. Suggested readings used for this video are For My Legionaries, a must-read. Next, The Nest Leader's Manual. Then Circulars and Manifestos from 1927 to 1938. And lastly, The Prison Notes. All great books, but most importantly, For My Legionaries, a definite must-read of a great man who is known and remembered all too little today, but whose life story we can learn a lot from.